If you are an older man without a girlfriend, what I'm about to say may unsettle you. But it might also change the way you see yourself forever. Because the truth is, your singleness is speaking louder than your words, louder than your achievements, louder than the life you think you've built. And most men never realize what it's actually saying. You've been told that time is on your side. That maturity automatically comes with age. That women will eventually see your value if you just stay patient and focused. But what if that belief is the very thing keeping you invisible? What if the years you think are adding weight to your presence are quietly stripping it away? Here's the part nobody warns you about. As a man grows older, he is no longer judged by his potential, he is judged by his patterns. Not by what he says he wants, but by what his life reveals he has avoided. And women notice this instantly, even if they never explain it out loud. This is not a video about blaming women. It's not about shaming men. It's about exposing the psychological truth most people are too uncomfortable to face. Why some men become more attractive with age, while others slowly disappear from emotional relevance. Why being independent can quietly turn into emotional isolation. And why the peace women build alone has become the strongest competition you'll ever face. If you've ever wondered why connections fade faster now, why attraction feels harder to sustain, or why silence has replaced curiosity in your dating life, this conversation is for you. Because by the end of this video, you will no longer see your age, your singleness, or your past the same way again. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let's begin with the uncomfortable reality most men would rather avoid. Being single as an older man is never neutral. It may feel neutral to you because you live inside your own intentions, your own history, your own justifications. But the world doesn't meet your intentions first, it meets your patterns. And women, especially emotionally intelligent women, read patterns instinctively. When a woman encounters an older man without a partner, her mind does not jump to judgment in a cruel way. It moves toward meaning. Human beings are meaning-making creatures. She wonders what story this singleness tells, not because she is suspicious, but because she is perceptive. She asks herself questions you may never hear spoken aloud. Has he chosen solitude deliberately, or has he retreated into it? Has he healed from past relationships, or has he simply learned how to avoid intimacy more efficiently? This is where many men misunderstand attraction. They believe attraction is about presentation, how confident they appear, how successful they are, how unaffected they seem. But attraction, at its core, is about coherence. Does this person make sense emotionally? Do their words, choices, and history align? Singleness without reflection creates a gap in that coherence. And gaps make people uneasy. Here's the part that stings. If you cannot articulate why you are single in a grounded, self-aware way, someone else will unconsciously write that explanation for you. And their explanation will rarely be generous. Silence invites assumption. Emotional ambiguity invites caution. What you do not clarify, you unintentionally complicate. Many older men believe their independence is attractive, and independence can be attractive when it is rooted in choice. But when independence is actually unresolved attachment avoidance, it registers very differently. It feels rigid, closed, final. Women don't experience that as strength. They experience it as emotional inaccessibility disguised as self-sufficiency. Psychologically, humans are drawn to those who demonstrate relational competence. Not perfection, not flawlessness, but competence. The ability to sustain connection, the ability to repair after conflict, the ability to remain emotionally present under pressure. If a man has reached a certain age and has no relational continuity in his life, the question naturally arises, what happens when intimacy demands flexibility? This is not about shame, it's about awareness. Singleness can be a powerful, conscious choice, but only when it is accompanied by clarity. A man who can say, I chose to step away from relationships to unlearn certain patterns, and here is what I discovered about myself, communicates maturity. A man who says, "I've just been focusing on myself," without depth communicates avoidance, even if unintentionally. Women are not evaluating your worth, they are evaluating emotional risk. At a certain stage in life, attraction becomes less about excitement and more about nervous system safety. Does this person bring steadiness or confusion, expansion or contraction, consistency or emotional guesswork? The deeper truth is that singleness amplifies who you are. If you are reflective, it makes you intriguing. If you are stagnant, it makes you concerning. Time does not soften people automatically. Time reveals what people have been practicing internally for years. Philosophically speaking, relationships are mirrors. They confront us with our blind spots, our defenses, our unexamined beliefs. Avoiding them for too long doesn't make you peaceful. It often makes you unchallenged, and an unchallenged self rarely evolves. This is why women sense danger, not physical danger, but emotional cost. They sense the possibility of being the first person to confront decades of unprocessed habits. They sense the weight of becoming a catalyst rather than a partner. And emotionally healthy women opt out of that role quickly. The signal you send is not, "I am single." The signal is, "I have or have not done the work that intimacy requires," and that signal is felt long before it is understood. If you are an older man without a girlfriend, the invitation here is not to panic or perform. It is to clarify. To ask yourself difficult questions with honesty instead of defensiveness. What have my relationships taught me? How have I changed because of them? What patterns do I actively work against? What emotional skills do I now possess that I didn't before? Because when you can answer those questions calmly, confidently, and without resentment, your singleness stops being a question mark. It becomes a statement. And here is the closing truth worth sitting with. Singleness is only a red flag when it hides a refusal to grow. When it reflects self-awareness, it becomes proof of depth. The difference is not time. The difference is courage. There is a dangerous assumption many men make as they grow older, and it quietly works against them. They assume that age itself is an asset, that years lived automatically translate into desirability, authority, and attraction. But age on its own is neutral. It does not impress. It does not repel. What matters is what you have done with those years internally. Attraction is not built on time served. It is built on depth earned. A man can be 40, 50, 60 years old and still be emotionally inexperienced. Not because he hasn't lived, but because he hasn't reflected. Life teaches nothing unless you pause long enough to extract meaning from it. Experience without reflection doesn't create wisdom. It creates repetition. This is where many older men lose the plot. They believe their survival equals maturity. They think enduring hardship automatically made them emotionally competent. But surviving is not the same as integrating. You can endure life while remaining emotionally frozen at the age where your wounds first formed. Women don't respond to stories of struggle. They respond to who you became because of it. Emotional depth is not about talking more. It's about understanding more. It's about recognizing your own emotional patterns before someone else has to suffer them. It's about knowing how you respond to closeness, rejection, boredom, conflict, and vulnerability. Most men are aware of what they've been through. Very few are aware of how those experiences shaped the way they love. This is why attraction changes with age. In youth, confidence can be performative. In maturity, confidence must be embodied. A man who knows himself doesn't need to dominate a room. His presence regulates the room. He doesn't rush to impress. He listens without preparing a defense. He speaks without posturing. That is emotional depth. And emotional depth creates safety. Not the kind of safety that feels dull or predictable, but the kind that allows a woman to relax her nervous system. Attraction thrives where the body feels safe enough to open. Money does not do this. Status does not do this. Charisma alone does not do this. Emotional coherence does. An older man who lacks emotional depth often mistakes control for strength. He believes being unshaken means being unmoved. But emotional strength is not rigidity. It is responsiveness. It is the capacity to stay open without collapsing, to stay grounded without withdrawing. When a man hasn't cultivated emotional depth, his reactions feel disproportionate. Minor disagreements trigger major shutdowns. Vulnerability feels like threat. Feedback feels like attack. Over time, women learn that emotional honesty costs too much with him, so they stop offering it, and attraction quietly dies. Philosophically, love is not the meeting of two perfect people. It is the meeting of two aware people. Awareness allows choice. Without awareness, behavior becomes automatic, and automatic behavior feels unsafe because it is unpredictable. Women sense this instantly. They may not name it intellectually, but they feel it somatically. They feel the tension in conversations that never go anywhere, the emotional flatness where curiosity should be, the subtle absence of empathy during moments that require attunement. Depth is what allows a man to hold complexity without simplifying it, to hear discomfort without dismissing it, to stay present when things stop being flattering. And this is where older men either become deeply attractive or quietly irrelevant. Because emotional depth is cumulative, it compounds over time if cultivated. But if ignored, the emotional range narrows, opinions harden, flexibility decreases. What once felt like confidence begins to feel like stubbornness. Women don't fall for age, they fall for integration. They fall for a man who has made peace with his past instead of dragging it into the present. A man who understands his shadow instead of projecting it. A man who can say, "This is where I struggle," without losing his sense of self. That kind of man doesn't chase validation. He generates trust. And trust stability is erotic. Emotional intelligence is erotic. The paradox is this: the older a man gets, the less he can rely on surface-level traits, and the more his inner architecture becomes visible. You cannot hide behind charm forever. Eventually, people feel how it is to be with you. So the real question is not how old you are. The question is how deep you have gone. Have you explored your fears or just managed them? Have you understood your patterns or just defended them? Have you softened where needed without weakening your boundaries? Because emotional depth is not about being sensitive, it's about being real. And realness is what creates lasting attraction. Here is the truth worth taking with you. Time will not make you desirable, reflection will. Depth is not given by age, it is earned by courage. There is a phrase many men use that sounds healthy on the surface, but often hides something much deeper. I value my independence. I like my peace. I don't need anyone. These statements are not inherently wrong. In fact, when they come from a grounded place, they can reflect emotional maturity. But very often, they don't. Very often, they are the language of avoidance dressed up as self-respect. Psychologically, humans are wired for connection, not dependency, not enmeshment, but connection. When a man insists too strongly that he needs no one, it is worth asking what he had to give up emotionally in order to survive that belief. Because true independence does not fear closeness. It can enter intimacy without losing itself. Emotional avoidance, on the other hand, experiences closeness as a threat. Many older men believe they are independent when in reality they are simply unchallenged. They have structured their lives to minimize emotional friction. They avoid situations that require vulnerability. They withdraw at the first sign of emotional complexity. Over time, this withdrawal begins to feel like peace. But peace that comes from disconnection is not peace. It is emotional numbing. Avoidance feels calm because nothing is being touched. This is why statements like, "I don't do drama," often translate to, "I don't do emotions." But emotions are not drama. Emotions are information. They tell us when something matters, when something hurts, when something needs attention. When a man avoids emotional engagement, he isn't being rational. He is being defended. Philosophically, avoidance is not the absence of fear. It is the organization of life around it. An emotionally avoidant man doesn't see himself as closed. He sees himself as reasonable. He believes others are too demanding, too sensitive, too complicated. What he rarely considers is that intimacy feels demanding when you have not developed the capacity to be present with it. Women experience this avoidance long before it becomes visible in behavior. They feel the emotional ceiling. Conversations don't deepen. Conflicts don't resolve, they disappear. Vulnerability is met with logic instead of empathy. Over time, a woman learns that emotional expression costs her connection rather than strengthens it. So she adapts, she becomes quieter, or she leaves. The tragedy is that avoidant men often believe relationships fail because people expect too much from them. In reality, relationships fail because emotional absence slowly erodes trust. You cannot build intimacy with someone who is only partially available. Consistency is not about showing up physically. It is about showing up emotionally, even when it is uncomfortable. Independence without emotional literacy becomes isolation. True independence allows for interdependence. It allows two whole individuals to choose each other without fear of losing themselves. Avoidance, by contrast, keeps relationships shallow so that the self never has to be examined. This is why avoidant men often feel confused when attraction fades. They believe they were stable, reliable, drama-free. And they were, but stability without emotional engagement feels lifeless. Reliability without warmth feels transactional. Calm without curiosity feels empty. Emotional intimacy requires risk. It requires the willingness to be seen imperfectly, to stay present when your defenses want to shut down, to tolerate discomfort without withdrawing affection. Avoidant men often mistake their discomfort for incompatibility. They believe something is wrong with the relationship when what is actually happening is growth knocking on the door. And growth always feels destabilizing at first. At a certain stage of life, women are no longer impressed by self-sufficiency that leaves no room for them. They are drawn to men who can stand firmly in themselves while remaining emotionally open. Men who don't confuse boundaries with walls. Men who understand that closeness does not equal control. The irony is this: many men avoid intimacy to protect their freedom, but emotional avoidance quietly robs them of the deepest freedom. There is the freedom to be fully known and still chosen. Independence should expand your capacity for connection, not replace it. Peace should come from emotional regulation, not emotional withdrawal. Strength should allow for vulnerability, not forbid it. If you find yourself constantly proud of how little you need, ask yourself a more honest question. Is this strength, or is this armor? Is this peace, or is this avoidance that has gone unchallenged for years? Because here is the truth worth sitting with. Independence that cannot tolerate intimacy is not independence at all. It is fear that has learned how to sound confident. There is a fundamental shift happening in relationships that many men have not fully grasped yet. The competition is no longer other men. It is not youth, beauty, money, or status. The real competition now is a woman's peace, and peace is a powerful opponent because once a woman experiences it, she becomes unwilling to negotiate it away. For a long time, relationships were built on necessity. Emotional, financial, social survival often required partnership. Today, that is no longer the case. Many women can sustain themselves materially, emotionally, and socially. This doesn't make them less relational. It makes them more selective. They are no longer asking, "Can I survive with this person?" They are asking, "Does my life feel better with this person in it?" That question changes everything. When a woman meets an older man, she is not measuring him against younger men. She is measuring him against her current emotional baseline. How does she feel when she is alone? How regulated is her nervous system? How much freedom, clarity, and self-trust has she built? If a man disrupts the equilibrium without offering something deeper in return, attraction doesn't fade dramatically. It simply never takes root. This is why many men feel confused. They are doing what once worked. They are stable. They are reliable. They are not overtly harmful, but they are not adding emotional value. And neutrality is no longer enough. Peace is not boredom. Peace is safety without stagnation. It is clarity without chaos. It is emotional steadiness without emotional numbness. When a woman has tasted that, she becomes highly sensitive to anything that threatens it. Inconsistent communication, emotional withdrawal, defensiveness, unresolved resentment, outdated power dynamics. These are not minor flaws anymore, they are disqualifiers. Men often interpret this as women being too picky. But this is not pickiness, this is discernment. Psychologically, when a person has done enough inner work, their tolerance for emotional noise decreases. They no longer confuse intensity with intimacy. They no longer chase potential. They pay attention to how interactions land in their body. Do they feel calmer or more anxious? More themselves or more constrained? If a man creates confusion, tension, or emotional labor, even unintentionally, he is not competing with another man. He is competing with a woman's ability to go home, exhale, and feel whole on her own. And solitude, when chosen consciously, is incredibly attractive. This is where many older men misread the situation. They assume women leave or disengage because someone better came along. More often, what came along was relief. Relief from explaining. Relief from managing emotions that weren't theirs to manage. Relief from carrying relational weight alone. Peace does not beg. Peace does not argue. Peace simply walks away. Philosophically, this reflects a deeper truth about human relationships. We are drawn to environments that support our nervous system. Love is not just an emotional experience. It is a physiological one. If being with someone consistently dysregulates you, your body will eventually reject the connection, no matter how strong the intellectual attraction once was. This is why emotional presence matters more than performance. A man can say all the right things, but if his actions create instability, his words lose power. Consistency is calming. Accountability is calming. Emotional availability is calming. When those qualities are missing, peace becomes the preferred partner. The opportunity here is not to compete harder. It is to become someone whose presence feels better than absence. Someone who adds clarity instead of confusion. Someone who can sit with discomfort without creating chaos. Someone who understands that leadership in a relationship is not about control, but about emotional steadiness. Men who understand this stop asking how to attract women and start asking how to become emotionally reliable. They realize that the goal is not to be impressive, but to be grounding. Not to be exciting at all costs, but to be safe enough for depth. This is where attraction matures. It becomes quieter but stronger, less dramatic but more enduring. If you are an older man wondering why connection feels harder now, this is not a loss of advantage. It is an invitation to evolve, to recognize that women are no longer choosing partners out of fear of being alone. They are choosing partners who honor the peace they have fought to build. And here is the truth worth carrying forward. If your presence does not improve her peace, she will protect it without apology. Become the kind of man whose presence feels like home, not work. There is a quiet but profound distinction most people miss, and it shapes everything about how they relate to others. Aging is inevitable, maturing is optional, and the difference between the two is not experience, intelligence, or even intention. The difference is self-reflection. A man can live many years and never truly meet himself. He can accumulate memories, achievements, disappointments, and still remain unchanged at the core. This is why time alone does not produce wisdom. It merely reveals what a person has been reinforcing internally for decades. Maturity begins the moment a man turns inward without defensiveness. Self-reflection is not self-criticism, it is self-honesty. It is the willingness to observe your own emotional patterns without justifying them. To notice how you react when you feel rejected, challenged, ignored, or misunderstood. To ask not only what happened, but why it affected you the way it did. Many older men resist this process because they confuse reflection with weakness. They believe that questioning themselves undermines authority. In reality, it strengthens it. A man who understands his inner world does not need to assert power externally. His groundedness speaks for him. Psychologically, unexamined patterns do not disappear with age, they harden. Coping mechanisms become personality traits. Defenses become identities. What once protected you begins to limit you. And relationships suffer not because of what you did in the past, but because of what you refuse to look at in the present. This is why some men repeat the same relationship story over and over, just with different faces, the same conflicts, the same emotional distance, the same ending. They blame circumstance, compatibility, timing. Rarely do they ask the most important question. What am I consistently bringing into these dynamics? Self-reflection interrupts repetition. It allows a man to separate who he had to become to survive from who he now chooses to be. It gives him the power to respond instead of react, to pause instead of defend, to listen without preparing a counterargument. From a philosophical standpoint, maturity is the integration of opposites: strength with humility, confidence with curiosity, authority with empathy. A mature man does not cling to being right. He is more interested in being real. He understands that growth requires discomfort, and discomfort is not a threat. It is information. Women sense this instantly. A man who has reflected on himself does not feel rigid. He feels spacious. Conversations with him feel alive because he is not protecting an image. He can admit uncertainty without collapsing. He can acknowledge mistakes without shame. That creates trust, and trust is the foundation of intimacy. By contrast, a man who has aged without reflection feels predictable in the worst way. His opinions are fixed. His emotional responses are scripted. There is no room for dialogue, only monologue. Over time, this rigidity becomes exhausting to be around. Maturity is not about having all the answers. It is about being willing to question yourself. This is why older men who mature become increasingly attractive, while those who merely age fade into emotional irrelevance. One becomes more flexible, more present, more grounded. The other becomes defensive, dismissive, and increasingly disconnected from emotional reality. Self-reflection also changes how a man relates to his past. Instead of dragging old wounds forward, he extracts lessons. Instead of carrying resentment, he carries understanding. He stops needing validation from relationships and starts offering stability to them. And stability, when it comes from self-knowledge rather than control, is deeply attractive. The process is not glamorous. It requires sitting with regret without collapsing into guilt, acknowledging missed opportunities without blaming others, letting go of narratives that once protected your ego but now limit your growth. But the reward is profound. A man who reflects becomes someone who can love without fear of losing himself. He becomes someone who can be challenged without becoming threatened. He becomes someone whose presence invites honesty rather than performance. If you are an older man without a girlfriend, this is not a verdict. It is a moment of truth. Singleness becomes a mirror. It asks whether you have used time to build armor or awareness, whether you have aged into rigidity or matured into depth. Because in the end, people do not connect with how long you have lived. They connect with how deeply you have understood yourself. And here is the thought worth taking with you. Time will pass whether you reflect or not. The question is whether you will pass through time unchanged or allow time to transform you.